David's journey begins with an unexpected inheritance, a rural property gifted to him by a distant uncle, Earl Thompson, a man he never knew and whose name had never been spoken by his family. This inheritance, along with a sealed letter filled with eerie warnings, plunges David into the deep isolation of the Tennessee countryside. As he arrives at the weathered farmhouse, surrounded by dense woods, a profound silence and an unsettling sense of solitude envelop him. The story unravels as David confronts the haunting mysteries buried in his uncle's legacy, revealing the chilling truth behind the inheritance and the forces lurking in the shadows of the land. The GPS had ceased functioning about 20 minutes earlier, forcing me to depend solely on Robert Mitchell's handwritten instructions and a few weathered road signs along the way. Rural Tennessee unfurled endlessly on either side of my rental car, rolling hills blanketed with dense forest that seemed to envelop the narrow asphalt ribbon before me. I had been driving for 3 hours since departing Nashville, and the isolation was beginning to weigh heavily on me. 3 days had passed since Robert had handed me the keys to Uncle Earl Thompson's property. Along with a sealed letter he urged me not to open until I arrived. The whole inheritance still felt unreal. I had never even heard of Earl's name mentioned by my parents, much less met the man. According to Robert, Earl had made the deliberate choice to leave the property to me alone, rather than my father or any of my cousins. With no explanation, my phone displayed no signal bars as I turned on a Thompson Road, essentially a gravel track winding through towering oaks and pines. The branches arched overhead, forming a canopy that blocked much of the fading afternoon light, making my journey feel like driving through a tunnel. Along the way, there were no houses, no mailboxes, nor any signs of human presence, just trees standing close on both sides of the vehicle. Suddenly, the farmhouse emerged where the road curved, as if rising out of the forest itself. Weathered gray wood siding shrouded the two-story structure, and a wraparound porch sagged noticeably on the left. The roof seemed intact, though dark streaks ran down from the gutters. About 50 yards to the right stood a detached barn with faded red paint, worn to rusty patches. Behind it all, the forest stretched endlessly, a solid wall of green rolling toward the horizon. I parked beside Earl's old pickup truck, a Dennet 4 that looked as if it hadn't moved in months. Stepping out, I was immediately struck by the profound silence. No sound of traffic, no neighbors tending yards or playing music, barely even birdsong. The nearest town, Cookeville, set a 40-minute drive back the way I had come, underscoring just how truly alone I was out here. Upon stepping inside Uncle Earl's farmhouse, the atmosphere seemed frozen in time, as if life had been abruptly paused rather than concluded. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and lingering solitude. Amid the retro furnishings, a brown corduroy couch, worn wooden tables, and a recliner aimed at an ancient television, I found a sealed letter addressed to me, its handwriting steady, yet revealing the tremors of age. Earl's words unfolded a chilling inheritance beyond the land itself. The letter revealed 6 essential rules, each bearing the weight of hard-earned wisdom from decades of eerie coexistence with unknown forces lurking in the surrounding woods. Earl's first admonition was to securely lock all doors and windows after dark, emphasizing vigilance and checking them twice to bar entry to the sinister presences that prey only on unguarded openings. He warned unequivocally against venturing into the woods alone or after sunset, as the treeline acted as a fragile but vital boundary protecting both residents and the entities within. The admonition extended to interactions with strangers. Earl cautioned never to answer the door after dark, regardless of their pleas, for these were the deceptive murmurs of creatures masquerading as human. Perhaps most unsettling was the instruction to ignore the appearance of a red house on the property, never to acknowledge, approach, or enter it, because it was a phantom that should not exist for those bound by the family's legacy. The cellar and attic were also sealed off by decree, the areas behind these locked doors shrouded in a mystery lethal to anyone daring to cross their thresholds. Though the rules might sound the ramblings of an isolated mind, the urgency and precision in Earl's writing spoke of lived experience layered with fear and responsibility. He begged me to trust and follow these commands without question, for my survival hinged on respecting unseen boundaries that kept the darkness contained. The letter concluded with assurances that the property was equipped to sustain me should I adhere to the rules. A stocked pantry, ample firewood, and a functioning generator, but only if I honored the delicate balance Earl had maintained. This inheritance was far more than land and a home. It was a guardianship tethered to secrets and sacrifices, a watch passed down through generations, demanding my unquestioning obedience. The evening brought a palpable shift in the atmosphere. As darkness settled over the old farmhouse, the stillness was pierced by an unsettling howling drifting through the kitchen window while I washed a coffee mug. At first, the sound mimicked the wind's gentle chorus, but there was no breeze to explain it. The howling repeated, rising and falling irregularly, reminiscent of a stretched, distorted dog's cry that made my shoulders tense involuntarily. The echoes ricocheted between tree trunks, rendering its source impossible to pinpoint. I moved closer to the window, pressing my hands against the glass, peering into the void beyond the backyard, just 30 yards to the tree line, but beyond that, only darkness. No shapes, no movement. The howling continued intermittently, sometimes from directly behind the house, other times near the barn. Each time, Earl's second rule rang through my mind: never venture into the woods alone, and never after sunset for any reason. There was no question of wandering those forest paths tonight, especially with the sound surrounding me. I methodically checked every window facing the woods, securing each latch, though the warped frames left doubt about their efficacy. The old house seemed alive, each creak amplified by the eerie soundtrack outside, making the familiar groans of settling would feel ominous. By 10:30, I settled into Earl's recliner, facing the front door and driveway window. The television flickered with ghostly, grainy images but only added to the unsettling ambience, so I switched it off, favoring the heavy silence. Outside, the howling became rhythmic, as if encoding a message beyond human comprehension, crescendoing with an almost human intensity, then receding into animal-like whimpers. Just past midnight, a knock echoed at the front door. 3 measured taps, insistently polite yet persistent. My body tensed instantly. Peering through the antiquated brass peephole, I made out a figure on the porch. A woman cloaked in a dark hooded sweatshirt, standing still in the dim ambient light without the porch lamp switched on. The knocking resumed with an accompanying voice, a weak, strained plea for help. She claimed her car had broken down a mile back, that she was injured after hours of walking and needed only a moment to use a phone. The woman's desperate tone tugged on human sympathy, but Earl's third rule thundered in my memory: never open the door to strangers after dark, regardless of their pleas. The knocking grew more urgent as she insisted on aid, plying a litany of heartbreaking excuses: diabetes, being followed, having children waiting. Her manner, though, bore something off. The rigid poise, the unnaturally steady head, the stillness in the cold night, all betrayed a shadow beneath the hood, an absence of truly human warmth. I resisted the urge to unlatch the deadbolt. From my vantage point by the window, I observed her drawing closer, pressing firmly against the door with a fluid, almost unnatural glide that suggested conscious control over her movements. Minutes passed in an agonizing standoff, her voice weaving appeals of vulnerability and desperation with unwavering patience. Eventually, she stepped back and silently glided down the driveway. The howling outside surged anew, now multiplied, overlapping as a chorus from different parts of the woods. a cacophony that forced me away from the window into the heart of the living room. Throughout the long night, every small sound, the creaking floorboard underfoot, the hum of the refrigerator, became suspicious. The ancient house, these woods, and the soft, spectral howling blended into a haunting symphony, weaving Earl's grave warnings into the darkness around me. As night deepened around the old farmhouse, a sudden, deliberate knocking echoed through the quiet house. At the front door, a hooded figure stood with an unsettling calmness, her knocks firm yet polite. When I peered through the brass peephole, the dim light revealed a woman in a dark sweatshirt, her face hidden beneath her hood. Her voice called softly, pleading for help. She claimed her car had broken down miles back and that she'd been walking for hours, injured and desperate for a phone. Her words were measured and heartfelt, talk of pain, cold, and urgency to contact her worried children at home. The knocking pattern was polite yet persistent, the voice weaving a narrative of desperation and vulnerability. Despite the sincerity in her tone, every instinct screamed caution. Earl's third rule circled vividly in my mind: never open the door to strangers after dark, no matter their story or need. I watched her stance, too rigid, too composed for someone supposedly hurt. Her hood pulled up although the night was calm, her movements unnaturally fluid, almost gliding. As her pleas grew more insistent, shifting from polite requests to emotional manipulation, I remained unmoved, recalling the warnings about the things that came to the door not being human. Minutes stretched with her relentless knocking and laments, claiming diabetes, threats, and danger behind her, each story designed to break down my resolve. Yet through the kitchen window, I saw only stillness beyond her eerie mask of normality. I refrained from unlocking the door, securing every latch once more. The night outside bristled with unseen eyes and hostile howls as I stood firm against the persistent temptation at the doorstep. As night deepened, an unsettling unease settled around the farmhouse. Strange sounds emerged from both the attic and the basement, disrupting the stillness and amplifying my growing anxiety. Above me, the attic seemed alive with footsteps, soft yet urgent, accompanied by the occasional crash of objects being knocked over. The eerie noises were punctuated by a chilling, high-pitched voice calling my name. It was a child's voice, playful in tone, yet unnerving given the knowledge of the tragedy in this very house. The voice pleaded for attention, enticing me to come upstairs to play, invoking memories of innocence twisted into something spectral. Below, the basement rattled with noises that were no longer simple scrapes or knocks. There was an insistence in the sounds, dragging, banging, and a chorus of whispered voices begging to be heard. The sensory onslaught from above and below merged into a cacophony that filled every corner of the old house, each sound rehearsing a silent narrative of desperation and entrapment. The chilling realization dawned that these were not random hauntings. The spirits, remnants of the past, were exerting a potent force, demanding, perhaps even desperate. Their presence was palpable, a constant reminder that the house was more than just a structure. It was a vessel for restless memories and unyielding secrets. With every passing moment, the weight of their voices pressed against my resolve, testing my strength and will to uphold the legacy entrusted to me. The morning light filtered softly through the overcast sky as I stepped outside, seeking clarity after a restless night. The woods around the farmhouse appeared tranquil and unassuming, their dense green canopy casting muted shadows over the damp earth. It was difficult to reconcile this peaceful scene with the eerie howling and unsettling noises that had invaded the night. I resolved to explore the property boundaries to better understand what I had inherited. As I crossed the open field stretching between the house and the barn, my eyes caught an impossible sight: a red house standing proudly in the middle of the grassy expanse. It was a striking anomaly, glowing with vibrant red siding and crisp white trim framed by a welcoming front porch. The more I stared, the more certain I became. This structure hadn't been there the day before. The field had been empty, dotted only with wildflowers and tall grass. Now, this house seemed seamlessly rooted in place, as if it had always belonged. Earl's fourth rule echoed sharply in my mind. If you see a red house on the property, do not acknowledge it. Don't look at it directly, don't approach it, and absolutely don't enter it. I fought the magnetic pull of the house's warm presence, averting my gaze toward the weathered barn instead. Still, my peripheral vision was relentless, drawn repeatedly to the red glow as sunlight played tricks on the shadows. Later that day, as dusk began to settle and I prepared a modest dinner, the red house shifted again. No longer in the center of the field, it now stood closer to the tree line, only yards from the farmhouse itself. Its windows emanated a soft, golden light reminiscent of candle or firelight, accompanied faintly by gentle piano melodies drifting across the evening air. The house promised comfort, safety, and a sense of normalcy so starkly absent from Earl's time-worn dwelling. Despite the allure, I held firm to Earl's warnings. The red house was not real, or more precisely, it was a supernatural manifestation designed to tempt and deceive. Though the glow and music offered solace after nights filled with haunting voices and creeping dread, the rules reminded me that some boundaries should never be crossed, no matter how inviting the alternative might seem. As I ventured deeper into the property, I stumbled upon Earl's worn leather-bound journal tucked away in the barn, carefully wrapped to protect it from the elements. Its pages chronicled years, decades even, of eerie experiences and strange phenomena on the land. Earl documented unexplained noises echoing through the woods and footprints appearing mysteriously around the house. He even wrote of relatives who came to visit but left suddenly, refusing to speak of what they'd encountered. Among the entries was a chilling account of my grandfather, Earl's brother, who swore never to return after a single weekend in 1987. What captured my attention most was Earl's detailed description of the hooded figure, the same one I'd heard knocking at my door. According to his writings, this figure appeared repeatedly, always employing polite knocking and desperate pleas, escalating over time in intensity and urgency. Earl noted the figure's unnerving, unnatural movements, and he warned that it came most frequently when new family members were present, almost as if it was drawn to fresh blood. The journal also recounted the tragic story of Earl's daughter, Rebecca, whose death haunted the house's legacy. A newspaper clipping wedged within the pages bore the headline, "Local girl dies in tragic accident." At just 8 years old, Rebecca died after falling through the attic's rotting floorboards during supposed renovations. Earl's entries from that time grew sparse and shaky, dripping with grief and self-reproach. For months following, he wrote little, but when he resumed, his tone was colder, more focused on documenting supernatural happenings rather than personal sorrow. This heartbreaking loss shed new light on Earl's sixth rule, never enter the attic, and clarified why he remained isolated on this land despite such trauma. Holding the journal in my hands, my heart weighed down by the sorrow and secrets it revealed. I understood that Earl had been more than just a victim of this haunting. He had dedicated himself to guarding the family legacy against something far darker than mere tragedy. As night deepened once more, the supernatural forces around me intensified, their desperation growing with each passing moment. The noises from the basement escalated into a clamorous barrage of voices. Men, women, children, all calling my name with a blend of pleading, commanding, and desperate tones. Their cacophony filled the house, creating an overwhelming pressure that threatened to shatter my resolve. They beckoned me into the darkness below, promising peace and freedom from rules and fear. Simultaneously, Rebecca's voice echoed from the attic, shifting from innocent pleas for companionship to haunting entreaties for me to join her in death. Her wails rose and fell with chilling rhythm, paired with frantic clawing and banging above that reverberated through the ceiling. I pressed my hands over my ears, struggling to block out the relentless assault that seemed both external and internal, invading my mind as much as the house. Through the front window, the red house greedily pressed against Earl's porch, its door yawning open to reveal an endless, warm interior filled with voices of a loving family calling me home with genuine affection, promises of belonging and acceptance that tugged at my deepest longings. The hooded figure multiplied, appearing at every window, striking the glass with relentless force, her hollow eyes unblinking and filled with silent menace. She demanded entry, scolding me for hiding behind Earl's rules and declaring her growing impatience. All around me, these supernatural entities coordinated a methodical siege, each assault exploiting different vulnerabilities: curiosity, compassion, loneliness, desire for comfort. Yet beneath their urgency lay a revealing truth. They were running out of time. My presence had triggered a critical moment, and they sought to claim me before I could break the family bond or abandon this place. Despite the chaos and mounting desperation, clarity emerged. Earl hadn't been a victim, but a sentinel, sacrificing his life to keep these dark forces bound within these woods. Now, as the heir, I was called to take up that mantle, to stand as the guardian to prevent their escape into the wider world. With resolve settling firmly in my bones, I declare my choice aloud, cutting through the tumult. I would stay. This was my property, my responsibility, and I would uphold the watch. As I spoke, the voices and sounds faded into an uncanny silence, the supernatural storm pausing, as if recognizing the acceptance of a new protector was the only thing that could quell their hunger. The fight for protection had reached its climax, but the legacy, my legacy, was just beginning. As a relentless night wore on, the supernatural forces pressing against every boundary Earl had set seemed to grow more desperate and overwhelming. The basement door, once securely locked, suddenly burst open with a force that shook the entire house. The kitchen chair I had wedged under the handle toppled to the floor, ineffective against the rising tide of chaos. From below came a chilling chorus of voices, men, women, children, all calling my name with desperate longing, pleading, commanding, weaving a tapestry of voices meant to break my resolve. Above me, Rebecca's voice transformed into a haunting wail, no longer innocent play, but a disturbing beckoning toward death itself. The attic echoed with frantic footsteps and crashing sounds, merging with the clamoring from below to create an almost unbearable cacophony. Outside, the red house had pressed itself closer to Earl's aging farmhouse, its warm, inviting lights contrasting sharply with the overwhelming darkness pressing in. The hooded figure multiplied, her hollow eyes pressing against every window pane, her demands escalating from polite requests to urgent commands to let her in. She struck the glass with a fury that threatened to shatter the fragile barriers protecting me. It became clear these supernatural beings weren't random threats, but a coordinated force exploiting every vulnerability, curiosity, compassion, loneliness, with precision and patience. Their desperation revealed that time was running out. They needed me to break or flee. In the center of this storm, I found an unexpected calm settling over me. The entities displayed their full power, laying bare their true nature and their deep dependence on my presence. Then, with steady conviction, I spoke aloud. I understand now. Earl faced this choice 20 years ago and stayed to keep you contained. I will do the same. I'm not leaving. This is my property, my responsibility, my watch. The voices from the basement fell silent. Rebecca's anguished wails softened in a quiet stillness. The The radiant red house faded, its alluring glow dissolving back into the empty field. The hooded figure withdrew from the windows, disappearing into the shadows of the tree line. Even a basement door swung shut with a soft click as its lock seemed to restore itself. I gathered Earl's worn journal from the kitchen counter, feeling its leather cover warm in my hands, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Settling back into Earl's recliner, the command center of decades of vigilance, I embraced the weight of the responsibility, just as he had, ready to continue the family legacy of guarding these woods against the darkness that dwelled within. The overwhelming torrent of supernatural forces that had assailed me throughout the night began to recede as I spoke my commitment aloud. The voices from the basement quieted, the relentless wails from the attic softened, and the warm glow of the red house faded into nothingness. The hooded figure, once a menacing presence at every window, withdrew quietly into the shadows of the woods. Even the basement door gently shut itself, as if the locks had mended instantly. I understood then the true nature of what Earl had protected and what weight I now bore. This property was not merely an inheritance. It was a sanctuary of containment, a bastion against forces that lurked beyond ordinary sight. Earl's years of vigilance and adherence to strict rules were not the delusions of an isolated man, but a testament to a profound family duty. The Thompson legacy was one of guardianship, demanding sacrifice and unwavering resolve. Embracing this role, I reclaimed Earl's journal and settled into the familiar worn recliner that had been his watchful throne for 2 decades. The house's silence felt purposeful, a respectful acceptance of my decision. The threats out in the woods remained patient and watchful, but contained for now by our lineage's commitment. With a steady hand, I opened the journal to a fresh page, the start of my own chapter in this enduring chronicle. The weight of responsibility was palpable, but so too was the clarity of purpose. This was no longer just a burden to bear, but a legacy to uphold. I wrote simply and decisively. Day 1, the watch continues. The family's covenant endured, a solemn watch passed from guardian to guardian, safeguarding the land and its dark secrets, a lineage bound not by choice, but by necessity and unyielding duty. David has fully embraced his role as the new guardian of the Thompson family legacy. The story concludes with a profound sense of renewed purpose and commitment, as he vows to vigilantly oversee the property and safeguard the supernatural secrets it harbors. By accepting this responsibility, David continues the family's sacred duty of containing the ancient forces tied to the land, ensuring that the legacy of the watch endures for generations to come. If this story captured your imagination, please subscribe, like, comment, and share to enjoy more enthralling tales like this one.